Welcome to our CyberWise Chats, where we talk about the challenges of raising and teaching digital kids. I'm Diana Graber, author of Raising Humans in a Digital World and founder of CyberWise and CyberCivics. Join every episode with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who's the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. Our always lively conversations tackle topics like cyberbullying, screen time, TikTok, and everything in between. We've got some great guests and promise each chat will give you the tips, tricks, and confidence you need to help kids use technology safely and wisely. So I'm going to start this right off the bat because we got a tight timeline here. Welcome everybody to our CyberWise chat. I'm Diana Graber. I'm the author of Raising Humans in a Digital World and founder of CyberCivics and CyberWise. Here as always with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who's the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. And we're so happy to welcome back Dino Ambrosi. He's been with us before. He is the founder of Project Reboot, a research-backed program that gives students the knowledge, resources, and community required to build an intentional relationship with technology, which he'll tell you all about in just a moment. But first, the topic of the day. We're going to talk today about new laws that ban teens from social media and will they work? So as a quick background here, in March, Utah became the first state to ban teens from social media, with Arkansas following shortly thereafter. Now there's a slew of states that are considering similar legislation. These state laws are actually different from a federal law currently being proposed that would prohibit all children under 13 from using social media and require permission for those kids that are in the teenage years. So today also, the newsflash, in case you missed it, the U.S. Surgeon General just issued a health advisory warning about social media's impact on developing brains. And just a few weeks ago, the APA, that's the American Psychological Association, issued a first ever health advisory on social media use in adolescents. Their ban actually recommended education training, which we were happy to see. So there's a lot going on this front. We have just a half hour to talk about it. So I'm going to start turning to you, Pam. You can kind of give us the lowdown on the Utah ban.
Okay, so let's talk about Utah. That was the first one. So this law, they say, is based upon some research by Jonathan Haidt and Jean Twenge. And Jean Twenge has been very anti-technology for a long time. I don't want to go into the details of the problems I see with their research assumptions, but the law basically says that you have to verify the age, or a social media company has to verify the age of any adult seeking to maintain or open a social media account. You have to get consent from a parent if you're under 18. It allows parents and guardians full access to their children's social media accounts, and it creates a curfew from 10:30 at night to 6:30 a.m. that blocks technology or social media, presumably, from kids' use. However, parents can in fact adjust that. It also makes it against this regulation to directly target children with advertising. It blocks minors' accounts from search information, and it allows parents or guardians to sue a social media company if they feel that their child is adversely affected by what they're consuming on social media. It's very broad sweeping. There are some problems raised in access to personal information. How do you prove that you're a parent? How do you prove that your child is of age? How do you monitor, usage? And it raises some sort of interpersonal issues. The first is that it's a huge violation of a kid's privacy to have full access to their social media accounts. That is not to say parents should not know what's going on with the kids' social media accounts, but privacy is something that needs to be developed over those developmental years. And so to completely expect them to expose all of their social media accounts right up to the age of 18 is really asking for trouble. The other is, we all know, if you have a teenager, you tell a teenager don't do something and it makes it the most interesting thing in the world. And these teenagers are very tech savvy, and Dino can talk about how clever kids have been just getting around very simple things. So they'll be all over this in no time.
Right. And just real quick, the Arkansas bill is very similar to what Pam just described, although it's a weird bill because it has some very odd exemptions, which I don't get at all. So for example, companies that offer subscription content in which users follow or subscribe are exempted. Virtual gaming is exempted. That means Twitch and OnlyFans. Companies that allow users to generate short video clips of dancing, voiceovers like TikTok, are exempted. And companies that consist mainly of direct exchanges of messages, photos, and videos like Snapchat are exempted. So weirdly, the apps that kids use are not covered by that law. However, kids cannot join Facebook and Twitter, which I'm sure they're all crying about. So I don't know. These laws are all over the place. I think there's much better solutions that hopefully we can talk about today. But I'm going to turn to Dino because he has such a compelling personal story that I hope he shares with you right now, and to explain why he started his project.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, thanks for having me back. I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, I'm Dino Ambrosi. I started a company called Project Reboot. It's a program that helps students build more informed and intentional relationships with technology. And it's really rooted in my personal struggle when I was in college to maintain healthy tech habits. I started to use my phone and social media in particular as a means of escaping discomfort. And that's a self-reinforcing habit. It begets more discomfort, which you've already trained yourself to run away from. So I definitely had an addictive relationship with my phone in college. And I had to leave school, hit the reset button, go do an internship. And I built up a much healthier relationship with technology. And it became really clear that our devices can be weight vests or jetpacks. They can make life a lot more difficult and weigh us down, but they can also really lift us to new heights and make school a lot easier and help us manage our time. And there are a lot of positive aspects. So when I got back to Berkeley, I created a course called Becoming Tech Intentional that I taught to over 100 of my fellow UC Berkeley students over 3 semesters. And the goal was to help them reset their relationships with technology and build better tech habits so that their devices are jetpacks as opposed to weight vests. And now that I've graduated, I've turned that into Project Reboot, which I've delivered to over 4,000 students over the course of the past year through speaking engagements, consulting, and running programs in schools. So yeah, it's a little bit of background about me.
Yeah, Pam, I was just thinking as Dino was speaking about how the jetpack analogy, it's so much how both these health advisories have said that social media is not inherently bad or good. And I just think
that's right.
not say this enough because it's always the boogeyman. And there's so many other, it's just a thing. It's just a tool, as you taught me so well when I was your student in graduate school.
Well, the other thing that really bugs me about all these regulations is that they ignore the user. They aren't about the kids, they're about parental control. And what I love about your story is that you talk about how you had to learn a set of skills. And there's no more important set of skills, not just for tech development, but for life success than self-regulation and self-awareness and intentionality. So the idea that they have all of these restrictions and giving the parents all this control, rather than to say, we're going to fund training programs to prepare kids for this future that is going to be here, is just sort of drives me nuts.
Yeah, me too. So I'm just curious, had there been such a ban, actually effective ban, when you were a teen, do you think that would have helped you at all when you reached college?
No, definitely not. I do think it's important to call out that the social media landscape was very different back then. A lot of things have changed since I first got on social media platforms. The main thing being that in my mind, they're actually, in a lot of cases, not really social media platforms anymore. I think the majority of time that teens are spending on services like Instagram and TikTok, they're not communicating with friends or sharing content from their lives or seeing what their friends are up to. They're watching short form videos. It's basically like bite-sized Netflix. And in a lot of ways, it has become an entertainment service. So I think that's an important distinction to make. But even with that in mind, I don't think it would have been helpful. It definitely would have made it more attractive to me to spend more time on social media. And this personally didn't become a problem for me until I got to college. And a big reason that it became an issue was because I did not have the necessary awareness to maintain a healthy relationship with my phone when life got more difficult. And it became my primary coping mechanism for dealing with stress, anxiety, and boredom. And banning social media is not going to address that problem, which I view as the core problem of how kids are interacting with social media today. Is it's becoming their coping mechanism, and that's really not healthy.
Yeah, I really worry about that because it's like turning the faucet on at age 18. The kids have like zero idea of how to use water, and
Yep.
water is going to be a big part of their life. So just the education piece cannot be mentioned enough, and it kind of bums me out that all these health advisories and these scares, like parents are so busy, they don't have time to monitor their kids on social media 24/7. It's like
Yeah,
we got to empower the kids, and I think God, I wish there was more focus on that.
absolutely.
Well, it presumes also a certain type of parent unilaterally. So, there will be some parents who pay attention and some parents who don't, and some parents who don't
Oh,
understand technology and think there's no point to it at all. So it really is, it's going to be very ineffective. We'll just say net
yeah,
that
and it's not
it,
going to save all kids because the kid who can talk their parent into giving them permission is probably the kid who needs the most help, and they're going to be still exposed to the same algorithms, the same
Yep.
misinformation. We have not solved that problem. So just so many things here. So Dino, I know you talk to a lot of kids through your work. What are
Mhm.
you hearing from them? Not specifically about bans, but what are their problems or their needs or their concerns?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. First off, I think a lot of parents would be surprised to hear that most kids that are addicted to social media and technology, which I think is actually a pretty high percentage, know that they are addicted and they recognize it's a problem. So I think that this is an area that leads to a lot of arguments in the household and ineffective parenting, and educators and teachers are prone to this as well. I think when we view kids that roll their eyes at the mention of you're on social media too much or you're spending too much screen time as unaware of a potentially unhealthy relationship that they have with their phone, we position ourselves as not being on their team, right?
Yeah.
And so much of the reason that, as I'm saying, kids do develop unhealthy relationships with their phones is it's become their coping mechanism for discomfort. So if you come at them with social media is the devil, you need to get off it, like you're spending way too much time on TikTok, it's bad for your attention span, this is bad for your mental health, you're inciting guilt, shame, anxiety, and stress, all of which they've already become accustomed to running away from by turning to their phone. So you really have to come at this from the perspective of I'm on your team. I recognize, first off, that there are beneficial aspects to social media and you're not using it for no reason. Getting rid of it entirely is, I believe, an overreaction. Because if you just paint this with too broad of a brush and you just say social media is bad, you shouldn't be using it, you're losing credibility in kids' eyes because they are using it in beneficial ways. It is integrated in their social life. It's important for them to communicate with their friends on it if all of their friends are already there, right? They don't want to be socially ostracized. So once you address that and make it clear that like you are not trying to control their behavior or give them prescriptions, then you can kind of break past that initial tension that you're met with, and you start to hear their perspective on what the issues are. And the biggest ones that come up for me are a lot of them do feel addicted to it. They've noticed impacts to their attention span. I've had a number of students tell me that they cannot watch movies anymore because they're so accustomed to watching TikToks. And I was actually just out in Utah, funny enough, working with a school called the Winter Sports School. And students showed me something that really freaked me out, which is there are accounts on TikTok now that will post full TV shows or even full-length movies over the course of a few different TikToks because they can be up to 15 minutes long. But kids cannot focus on a TV show by itself. So they have to have a distraction on the bottom half of the screen. So it'll be like an episode of South Park on the top half of the screen, and then a recording of someone playing video games on the bottom so that kids can toggle their attention. So that attention switching thing, I think, is having some real consequences, and kids are recognizing that, and it stresses them out. But again, it's become their coping mechanism for dealing with discomfort. So they turn to it more. And then the other big thing that I hear is students struggle with falling asleep because a lot of them are scrolling on TikTok and Instagram late at night, and they know that it's bad and they want to stop, but it's become a habit that's ingrained and it's a big challenge for them. So those are the big things I hear. And of course, all of this is socially reinforced. Like there's a culture around using social media. So kids don't want to be that one person that is off of it and then becomes ostracized. So that's why I kind of try to address everybody at once in a school and get them to have some conversations with each other and reframe how they're thinking about using social media.
And just a quick question, what ages were those kids you were talking to?
It was a high school in Utah, but I've worked with kids as young as 6th grade.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is when I teach cyber civics to 6th grade, it's always been the first year we talk digital citizenship, and I present all these like, hey, I'm just presenting you the facts here. I let them investigate all the things non-judgmentally. I'm a big advocate. I love technology. So, they're surprised at that. But always at the end of the year, they're like, I don't want to have anything to do with this stuff. Like, they're taking my personal information and they're doing this and that. And they step back and they decide they don't want to have anything to do with it. And at first, when I taught cyber civics, I told the parents, gosh, I didn't expect that reaction. And they go, oh no, we love it. But the more knowledge is power, right? And kids decide for themselves, like, I don't want to give that personal information away, or I don't want to be drawn into that. So
yeah, and I think what your point, Dino, about being on the kid's side, and the one thing that I would also caution parents against is telling your children that you're addicted. Now, Dino knows that I have, issues with the use of that word as a psychologist, because there's like diagnostic criteria and all that stuff, but it's a labeling. And any of those things that you're doing that becomes sort of global, and your child is addicted, then they don't have any room to maneuver. So what Dino recommends is really powerful, which is to really listen and understand what they're doing and help them, as Diana was talking about, get some information so that they can start to make some judgments about their behavior relative to their goals.
Yeah, and I think what we've discovered, probably being with actual kids who use social media as teenagers, is that they deserve a voice. You know what I mean? Like, come on, they're pretty smart, and they can be taught pretty easily to use these things way better than most adults I know use it. So these bans are so dismissive of them as developing young humans, right? We got to help them, like, get to the point where they don't need us anymore, and gosh, parents being able to read all of their social media when they're teenagers. I mean, imagine that's crazy. Like, if my parent had been with me at every party I went to, or every time I met my friends, it would be the same thing, I don't know, just crazy.
Well, 0.9 on APA was training.
Yeah, 0.9, right? Come on, APA. It should be 0.1. So, Dino, when you have worked with the students, I think that's something we have in common with our curriculums or our programs is we really focus on teaching kids what persuasive technologies are and what they look like, and what devices technology companies use to grab and hold on to their attention. But have you revisited your the people you meet with like a year later or something to see if what you taught sticks?
Yeah, so it's hard to get a census around that because you're just not going to get everybody to fill out a follow-up form. But I have spoken to a number of students from both the course at Berkeley and workshops that I've run down in Santa Barbara from last summer. And I've been really pleased with what I've heard in terms of screen time reductions staying more or less permanent. I had one student, Yasemin, at my course at Berkeley. She actually got a 4.0 for the first time this semester she took that course at Cal, largely because her screen time went from, I think she was at 6 hours a day before, and then got down to two or 2.5. And she took another one of my online courses back in March. And I was super happy to hear that she's still at 2.5. She's maintained that increased GPA that she's had. She feels like it's benefited her mental health. She's had more time to hang out with friends and do the things that college is really about, in my opinion. And, it's really awesome to see that down the line, students are still maintaining that reduction in screen time. So I've heard that their screen time starts to climb back up. That's unsurprising. I think it's very difficult to maintain perfect intention like after you get out of the program. But I think that progress in this domain is not really linear, right? Like, everybody kind of has a spike in screen time when things happen in their lives, and they still sometimes turn to it as a digital pacifier, as I say. But generally, I think the trend has been really positive, and that's been super encouraging for me to see.
Yeah, and don't you think that's true, Pam, that things like this need to be revisited? It's not a one-shot thing.
Well, right. And I think that that's the problem with a lot of the research is that it's not looking at an intervention, let's make you smarter, and then let's see how you're doing, is that it's looking at things, even when it's over time, it's not causal, it's correlational. And we have a question in here from someone who lives in Utah, and they're wondering two things. One, how the law will be enforced, or if the recent Supreme Court case will nullify the ability to sue social media platforms. Let me address the second one first. The research is so varied and it is so difficult to show causality that that's going to be a very hard one and expensive. It's going to be very expensive for the court system, but it's going to be a very, very hard one to prove. So even if it hadn't been for that Supreme Court ruling, there really aren't legs to stand on to isolate a child in a specific. I have no idea how they're going to enforce that. That just, we were talking before, Dina was talking about Kidzinos, and they set up, virtual networks, and they do all of these things to circumvent just the restrictions they have now. And there will be an entire industry in helping kids circumvent these restrictions. Yeah. So, between from false IDs to, the same way that they sneak into clubs, before they're 21. So it's not the right way to go about it. I'm much more in favor of arming kids with the tools they're going to need to succeed in media, in life.
Yeah. And one thing we haven't talked about is, we have some really audiences of kids that need social media so badly when they're teenagers. They're discovering things that, they have mental problems, or they need to reach out to friends, or they just maybe aren't getting support from their families. And for those kids, I think it's going to be tragic if they don't have that secondary source to go to for comfort, advice, support, community.
Yeah, and for parents who haven't spent any time on TikTok, because it's very strange, you should know that there's actually a lot of pretty good mental health information on TikTok. There's a lot of crap too, but there is some really good sources there, and people have been making a conscious effort to reach young people through TikTok with important information. So it isn't all dancing or worse.
Yeah, as is the case with all of social media. There's so many really good resources for kids, but again, it's up to us to teach kids how to find those resources and use them, and look away from the things that aren't helpful to them. And I think all three of us would agree, like, this is not to let the technology companies off the hook by any means. That's a whole nother problem that's going to take probably a ton of years to resolve, because we didn't do it up front. But they should definitely, make some changes to take developing teen brains into consideration. But that's a long-term fix, and helping the kids today that are using social media is a short-term fix that we really need to get on top of. So.
Well, and what you guys both illustrate so beautifully is that it isn't like this is years and years to get results. I mean, that awareness and practice at changing your behavior patterns happens over a few weeks or a few months. It is, and increasing awareness, it's kind of like going on a diet, and you lose a lot of weight and then you kind of slide back, but you now have this awareness of what is a better eating pattern for you as a touch point. And it really can function like that anchoring when things get out of control, to go, oh yeah, well, I remember Dino told me, I should think about this or think about that, or put a sign on my refrigerator door, or whatever. But it establishes a really powerful baseline.
Right. So Dino, when you work with kids, if you had to choose the 3 top line things that you teach them that really works, what would those be?
Yeah, so I think the 3 things that I focus on are mindset, environment, and habits. Like, those are the 3 main domains that they can make change in that are going to have lasting impacts. So mindset is probably the most important one. I think this is where a lot of the messaging that kids get hit with is ineffective. It puts them in the wrong mindset, the wrong mentality. The core of it for me boils down to recognizing that social media is something that you pay for with your time. It's not free. It doesn't charge you a subscription fee. That's right. But your time is incredibly valuable, and it's not something that you should just be giving away. And when you frame it in that way, it makes it a lot easier for kids to identify what an intentional relationship with it means. So, like, one thing I do in my presentations is I ask kids, how much would you pay for your favorite social media platform if it charged you a monthly subscription fee? Nobody ever says more than like $50 a month. But if you were to value your time at $20 per hour and you're spending 2 hours per day on TikTok and there are 30 days in a month, that's $1,200 per month that you're effectively paying for TikTok. So when you factor in that value of your time, it becomes clear to students that most of them are actually overpaying for social media. So I get them to figure out like what is a realistic time budget for you to spend on each app. And then how do you get a better deal out of it? And that forces them to think about like, what are the valuable aspects of social media? Because they are there. Again, the tool can be really positive if you use it well, and getting them to think about in what ways does this add value to my life? And how do I ensure that I'm spending the majority of my time on social media in pursuit of that value and not getting sucked down rabbit holes? That's the mindset that they should be having to build a positive relationship with it. The other mindset piece that I talk about is your content diet, in my eyes, is almost as important as your nutritional diet. Food nourishes your body, information nourishes your mind. And it's really critical to recognize that there's a big difference between short form content and long form content. And TikTok videos, Instagram, YouTube shorts, that stuff is short form entertainment. There's a lot of good stuff there. There's some informational stuff there, but you don't have a lot of agency in determining what you're seeing because most of it is algorithmically sorted and it's just trying to capture your attention. So it's going to skew towards things that are more entertainment based. And in my eyes, it's not that you shouldn't consume that at all. Just think of it as dessert, right? It should not be the majority of the content that you're consuming. The meat and the vegetables of your content diet are long form, informative content, and that doesn't have to be restricted to what you learn in school. Go take an online course to learn how to do magic tricks or like learn how to bake bread. I mean, there's an infinite number of things that you can use the internet to learn. And one thing I always tell parents is plant more than you prune, right? Like instill a desire in kids to leverage the positive aspects of technology. That's a much more effective way to change their relationship with it than overly focusing on restricting the negative aspects of it. Again, kids are smart. They want the best for themselves. You have to show them how they can use this in an intentional way. The endpoint that we should be optimizing for is kids having an informed and intentional relationship with technology. By definition, that is not going to be what happens if you set their intentions for them. They need to come to those own determinations, right? So it doesn't make sense to just impose rules without their consent. And then, the other two things, environment and habits. So environment is by your own volition, making changes to the way that your devices are configured to combat the persuasive design that social media companies are using to drive your behavior in an unintentional direction. So there are a lot of things that you can do here, like adding friction to getting to social media, even just going through the accounts you're following and unfollowing the ones that don't meet the threshold of being worth including in your content diet. Those are all steps that you can take to regain control over how you're interacting with these platforms. And then in terms of habits, there's a couple core things that I think if people did on a daily basis, it'd have a really positive impact. Number one, move your phone charger away from your bed. Do not be scrolling through a social media feed to fall asleep. It's a really bad habit that I had for a long time in college and towards the end of high school. And then just try to find like 30 minutes to be off of screens in general per day. Like unplug, get outside, let your default mode network run, like daydream for a little bit. I think that's really important for just processing the things that are happening in your life and maintaining your mental health. So there's more there, but those are the really core things that I recommend to students. And again, it all boils down to recognizing that they're smart, they want the best for themselves, and you need to position this as this is an us versus big tech thing, as opposed to a you versus me thing in order to get their buy-in.
Absolutely. I mean, those are just a gold mine of information that you just shared. So I don't even know where to go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, I have just one takeaway, right? Because what he said. Oh, that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, wherever he is. But the other thing is, I would say, parents, don't panic. Don't get all freaked out by all of these headlines that are grossly exaggerating the impact of social media. Is it a problem? Yes, it is. But it isn't a problem that we're going to solve without arming the kids with tools.
Yeah. And I wrote down 3 really quick takeaways. I mean, I teach kids so many lessons on so many things, but the ones that they really love, they love learning about persuasive technologies because it's eye-opening to them. arming them for misinformation is so important because they encounter so much of it on their social media networks. And then what to do if they're cyberbullied or they encounter hate speech. I mean, I could go on for 3 more days but those are really probably my top 3. Very easy to do. And actually, I'm going to close this out because I'm out the door to teach one of those lessons today. But before I leave, Dino, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is projectreboot.school. So that's where all the information is. Just go right there. Yeah.
All right.
And it's great.
It is. And so appreciative to have you back. You're just a wealth of information, and the work you're doing is so important. Love your 2 cents. So we hope to have you back on another CyberWise chat. And as always, thank you, Pam. Pam and I are going to talk about artificial intelligence with a special guest to be announced soon in our next chat, which I believe June 20th. Is that correct?
June 20 something or other, 22nd. I'd have to look at a calendar.
20th.
You're asking me this hard.
Yeah,
20th?
so
Okay.
we'll announce that soon. But AI has been so much in the news lately that we want to talk about how you can prepare your kids for that world, which is coming in some ways is already here. Lots to talk about. Dino, thank you so much. We'll be in touch. And for those of you who joined us today on the webinar, thank you. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you as well. And we will see you next time.